Well, welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julia Hovenier and I'm a collaborations coordinator. Along with my colleagues Deepa Merchandani and Mishri Jain, we help facilitate and coordinate collaborations across the Catalyst 2030 network. And these sessions, Learning for Collaborations, we hold them on a monthly basis to basically create a space for peer-to-peer learning and discussion on how we can enable better and systemic collaborations. We found it's really nice for people to just come together and talk openly about these things, obviously under the structure of a bit of guidance. So we invite people to come and share some knowledge and expertise as well. And so that is why I am very excited to hand over to Wando, who is actually the communications facilitator at Catalyst 2030. And she will be sharing, some stories and advice, expertise, whatever you want to call it, on how to effectively communicate in a collaborative way and for collaborations. So over to you, Wando. You're on mute. Great start for communications.
Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing great in this summer holiday season. I'm excited to engage you this afternoon. I'm actually in Lagos, Nigeria, where it's bright and sunny. It's usually been raining. So I currently live in Lagos, Nigeria, and basically here to share, because I think most of you are only on the right track, but I'm just going to give a few tips, things to inspire you, things you think together, and how you can work closely as a team. I'm sure you're going to find some common grounds and that you guys will work closely together to achieve all the great success. So before I begin, I'm going to ask for some housekeeping because I have a full team. Does everybody want to introduce themselves before I begin? Now that we're close and intimate, just where you're from, which location you can put on the chat before we begin. Somehow I don't see the chat button now that I'm sharing. So India. So it's evening, I presume. Another India, but not the same location. We have London, I know. Barcelona, very fun. France. Minneapolis, very close to Chicago, which is where I grew up. And London. Okay, we'll kick off. Just a little bit about me, just so you have some sense as to my background and why I have a lot of energy. So I am Nigerian American. I grew up in Nigeria as well as the US. I had my undergrad and grad school in Chicago. I never left. It's called the Windy City. But I always knew from a young age that I wanted to be in the creative branding marketing space. And so I started in financial services to get sort of that analytical background. But I have been working in marketing and I love creating and co-creating. So I'm really excited to be sharing with you guys. I have a big slogan that I use and I want to employ you. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. This all goes to what we're speaking about in terms of collaborations. And today I work with Catalysts and I will be working closely with you and your initiatives to see how we can work together closely to move forward. Okay. So just a little bit about Catalysts. I know some of you know them enough, but I think it's important to always remind you about the brand that's tying us together. We live in a world where we are trying to make a difference and change, and it's really because of your visionary work and your reason to believe that we're here. So we are working together to achieve some of this success, and it's across sectors, it's across the globe, and really looking at system change. And I just wanted to give a reminder. So I wanted to ask you why we should communicate. And I'm not just saying speaking to each other and being less shy about what you do, but really about being intentional about communicating about what you're different organizations and different goals. And why are we doing it? So at the end of this session, maybe I'll remind you, I'll encourage you, and I'll inspire you to do a little bit more and be a little bit more active in what you're doing from today. So that's my wish. So I'm going to ask for a poll today, just to kind of remind everybody to ask, what does communications means to you? If you can kind of just put that, are you currently putting time and effort into communicating your collaboration? If you can just click on it, so we just get a sense of the room. And then what are some of your bigger struggles, so that I know how to direct sort of the discussions. Sometimes people don't know enough about it. Sometimes we don't have budget for it. And obviously not enough time. When you're doing the work, you're like, I don't have time to spend time communicating. And of course, there are other reasons. So if you can just click on it. Okay, so I want to stop for a second, kind of talk about it for a little bit, just to see how everybody is putting time and effort into communicating. So do we really need this class if everybody is doing so well? Yes, no, and then what is the biggest struggle? A lot of people talked about knowledge and not enough time. So do people want to kind of share what their struggles have been? If anybody wants to raise their hand very early, just to introduce themselves and then mention what are some of their struggles and what they're facing. Am I going to spotlight somebody? Daisy's smiling. So Daisy, do you want to share?
Oh God, I was hesitating actually between lack of funds and lack of knowledge, because I think we blame the lack of funds, but if we had the funds, there would still be the lack of knowledge. I think I'm lucky. The project that I work on, we work with a communications team, but who don't have the funds yet. So they haven't got the funds but have the knowledge, and I'd happily do it myself, but don't feel like I have the experience. It's mainly, and it's a project in India, so I also don't know the landscape, don't know sort of all of those things as well.
Chris, would you like to share?
Yes, thanks, Mondo. I'll say that I lead our communications team at GHR, and we're a foundation, so it's not a lack of resources for us. But as a white-led foundation based in the US, as we enter collaboration with social entrepreneurs, faith leaders, community organizations from around the world, I'm really trying to build my consciousness around the power dynamics and how to decenter a foundation in these collaborations while leveraging, our platforms and our resources.
Great. Anybody else before we continue? Okay, I'll carry on to my little spiel that I have to share, just so that it's very easy for everybody to follow. I've sort of broken down the basics. And then when you do get the budget or the time, you can always have this friendly reminder that would help you to navigate. Somehow my laptops keep sticking. Okay, here. Oh, so I wanted to easily just differentiate and highlight the difference between communications and collaboration, because actually today there are tools and platforms that are very easy. There's Tendril, there's Workplace, there's so many different opportunities to collaborate and find like-minded people and share. But we need to share those ideas. We need to share some of the struggles. We need to amplify and see that you're going to find a lot of connections and a lot of spaces that we could talk to each other more. So working together on these projects, which is why Catalyst is so exciting and offers these forums like the Change Week, where people can lead actions and find out that they have similar tensions and similar struggles like Chris just shared. You'll find out that most of the time, these are really what the challenges are. And I've just mentioned that you make less mistakes. I already did that. It doesn't work. I tried Twitter. why should I go on Twitter now when my market issues are where I'm communicating to are not on Twitter? Saves you the stress, saves you the results and the focus, and you can spend a little bit more time being intentional with what works. Obviously, it brings people closer. I like to collaborate and co-create. It's one thing that I do because in fact, I think as I listen. So people talk a little bit more, and then you say, "Oh, that's a good idea," and then you can kind of powwow with others. So I think why it's also critical now, I mean, with all the issues with nutrition, security, climate, with the war, with food security, is really because we're the norm. This side of the social entrepreneurship or making a difference or changing forces you to have a different mindset and a different story. Because you're driving systemic change, you want to be able to articulate this. You want to be able to reach more people. You want to be able to facilitate on your audience and be able to capture all this, especially for report, for funders, for donors. And you already know this, but it's just ways to help you to be able to articulate this and deliver on your objectives and what you have. So I made a little checklist, and I said, we can debate this, we can discuss this where you need help with. Like I said, this is just more an inspiring session. So who is your target audience? A lot of times we go into the impact story, like, okay, I need to help this community. I need to change this. I need to be working on that. But when we want to communicate, we need to think back to who are we communicating? Are we talking to funders? Because it does change the tone of voice, because you have to sort of have scale, or you have to think about numbers or regional or location. If it's government in terms of a policy, then the language also has to be looked at and thought about. So every time in marketing or communications, your target audience shapes what type of messaging that you would have and your voice. And that's why there are different platforms for that. So we need to understand the tension and what they need and what they're looking for. Very simple. A funder would like a fact sheet or a profile of your organization. Do we all have profiles, whether it's short, whether it's with imagery, and just visualize that. So if you are filling any grant, you always have your profile. If you're in an airport or meeting somebody who just says, oh, I happen to work for one of these organizations, then you can easily share. The what. Again, it's always a good idea to have accurate, clear, simple messages that are short and that we can communicate that. I'm a fan for visual-led communications, just because I think it's a good way for people to see. I don't like cringe-worthy images, like always showing, negative all the time, but emotional marketing works. So be true to what your message is, and also be very clear what the call to action is. And if you need something, if you're going to produce, if you're going to design, just what do you want? What kind of messaging do you want on that image? That's very critical. And also, how many materials do you think you want to create at each time? Pace yourself. Is this like, I want to do all my creatives at the beginning of the year. I want to have it quarterly. I feel like I should have something, every month, just to reference. One could be a report. One could be before, one could be for the actual beneficiaries. So who am I talking to at each time, and how and what am I saying? And then the why. This goes back to something Chris said, how am I really reaching and accomplishing what I want? And am I really in tune with what they need? You mentioned something as well, Daisy, like your target audience is in another location. Do you have the right insights? Do you have the right communication? So maybe somebody on this call, I see two people from India, for instance. You could show them and say, what do you think of this? Does this look like, am I off? Is this too American? Am I like, on the right track? I always do this with the, whatever I'm doing, just to make sure that it doesn't piss anybody off. We're in an era where if you showcase something.
I said good morning earlier. Good morning.
If you showcase somebody, then you have to sort of sense check yourself as well. Where is the best place people just jump to? They just say, I want to open a Facebook account. I think I want LinkedIn. And this is where people get excited about, because there are all these platforms and you want to know, who are you communicating to on Facebook, for instance? Is your audience on Facebook? It could be WhatsApp. It could be a website. So you really need to think about this all in the scope of the activities that you're working on, and make sure that it's important. So when is it? When? Very easily timely. Like I mentioned, do you want to send a Christmas message? You want it to be seasonal? Do you feel like it should be when the summer is over, because now people are not paying attention? Is this really a good time to send out messages, or do you want it to do it, right when everybody comes out? So look at your target audience, see who you're trying to approach, have the material ready, because you never know the opportunities you have. You could have a call and somebody says, oh, can you just give me an example of what you do? And then you have this report. I can share this report with you. So timing is something that I always like to be ready. So again, I just put it in a different way. Audience, what are the objectives? Do they overlap? And maybe we can pause here for a second to just see what kind of challenges are you facing? Is it your target audience? You want to discuss that? Would it be something around objectives and messaging? If you put in the chat, then we can have a little chat about it. Or what types of reaction? I feel like audience and objectives and messaging is critical before we start talking about platforms. So I just wanted to sense check if some of you are facing any challenges or have some questions regarding audience and messaging. Any questions? I'm like Speedy Gonzalez. I'm going so fast. Everybody's clear on who they're targeting, who their audience is, who they would like to speak to, and who their beneficiaries are at each time, and they have their messaging down. Mr. Paco, I love to call on people.
Yeah, well, in my case,
tell us a little bit about your target audience.
Yeah, well, it depends. We don't have a collaboration yet, so we are thinking on that. And as a matter of fact, yeah, we are working exactly on that part. No, who is the ideal beneficiary? And this is well, we think Purpose Alliance is an innovation ecosystem. So we always start with purpose, and the second part is finding the ideal avatar, no, who's going to be the customer or beneficiary or user. And we understand clearly that this is really, really important. And we are looking to create, a circle, a community that is called Positive Impact Community. And trying to find and to invite change makers that are exactly in that stage of evolution, or they have a break and they are looking at how to activate their purpose to create a better world. So this is exactly what we are looking for. So we are still researching a little bit more on that. So this week and next week, basically, I'm doing a lot of interviews to really shape exactly who's going to be our audience. Because then, based on that, we are going to keep exploring. What are their needs, their hopes, their wishes, their pains, but to create our value proposition. So, but we are exactly on that, and based on that value, the communication is going to be created around.
Great. Miss Eva, do you have any words to say how you're dealing with your target audience and your messaging?
Well, thank you. I'm still partly in the design stage and not at the point where it would be referred to as a collaboration in the way that, or at least in the way that I think we're talking about. We are looking for people who are facilitators in any type of facilitation. It's a generic skill set. And our expertise is a particular kind of facilitation, facilitating circles with a talking piece, which in my experience are extremely effective and far easier to use, and an incredibly powerful, very effective, especially where there's a lot of emotional content. And so the partnerships will effectively be feasible once we identify the individuals who are facilitation leaders. And at the moment, the partnerships would be the organizations that use facilitators for any number of different purposes. And so it's right across all of the SDGs. It's not any one SDG, it's each and every SDG requires collaborations with facilitators. So we're at it, if you want to call it a meta partnership level, I'm not sure what the expression would be, but there are quite a few that have essentially expressed the interest. And so we're just proceeding to establish a schedule and identify the people who want to participate in this initial set of trainings. So it would be 4 3-hour sessions over the next number of months.
Great. Ms. Gupta, can you share a little bit about differentiation, especially in a place like India, where you have to be super hyper targeted? Can you talk about what you're facing with your target audience, messaging? Just share a little bit, because some people might be interested.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you to everyone here for facilitating the session.
Particularly the private sector, Sanju.
Okay, Deepa's aware, and so I'll just jump straight into the collaboration, the work that we're doing. So as part of Working Group 7 at the Global Catalyst Global, and in close collaboration with the India chapter, we're developing a program for deep engagement between the corporate sector and social entrepreneurs. And the main focus of the program is to actually demonstrate multiple models of engagement going beyond the traditional philanthropy donor-donee narrative that is usually associated with social entrepreneurs and corporates. We're also building models to go beyond CSR and layering multiple values on existing CSR programs. So that is a different model of collaboration within the existing CSR piece that I won't go into that in great detail because that may take up a lot of time. But basically, it's great timing in terms of India because one is we have ESG reporting, which is becoming compulsory for the top 1,000 corporates in India based on their market capitalization. So there's definitely a role for social entrepreneurs here to be not just the last mile implementers, but actually the thought leaders. And those are the kind of partnerships that we propose to showcase in the 12-week collaboration building program. Specifically, I think, it was mentioned about the power dynamic a little earlier in the chat, and that's something that we also are seeking to address through the innovative lab, where corporates will come together with social entrepreneurs to co-create solutions. These will be based on real life situations. So if I may take a minute more, for example, a lot of corporates have a policy or a stated goal to have a diversity hire or multiple diversity hires. And what they may be missing out is on the inclusion piece. So that is a challenge. And here we find that the social entrepreneurs playing a key role in actually making sure that the tools that the corporate uses in terms of digital tools are accessible to everyone, whether it is, if we look at the special needs community. So we are working, and then if you look at making it physically more accessible or changing perspectives and mindsets. So that's just one model of engagement. But basically, right now we are at this stage where we have had a series of learning spaces where we've invited corporates, and we've had the India chapter Catalyst members showcase their partnerships. We've had external corporates come in and actually explore and also explain. We really need to understand. Do I have time? Can I go on for another minute? Okay, please stop me if I'm going into too much detail. So basically, the one of the things that really came about in these proof of concept conversations that we hosted was there is definitely a gap area. So just providing social entrepreneurs a point to access and have these free-flowing conversations with corporates. And not just that, we realized that the corporates were equally keen on sharing their point of view. Like, there were senior CSR heads or sustainability chiefs who expressed that what was happening was that they were also tired of being looked at as only funders. They were talking about, like, why don't we have social entrepreneurs leverage our marketing channels, our distribution channels? There's so much in terms of capacity building that could be done. There's so much of mutual learning, in the sense that I think social entrepreneurs bring a lot of nimbleness and agility to any complex situation. We're always improvising on the spot, and we tend to work with very frugal resources. We could bring that as a great learning to the corporate, and whereas from the corporate, we could also learn a lot in terms of, better systems, better reporting mechanisms, how to articulate our story. So there are many models for collaboration, and honestly, we are very excited because there's a great interest around this right now, and we're just waiting to launch, honestly. Just finding the funds has been a bit of a challenge, but I'm sure we'll get there. Thank you so much for giving me the time. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to share? This is the collaboration, learning from others. So I really like some things you said, mutual, beneficial. They also don't like being looked at a certain way. So that's sensitive, or, paying attention, getting more insights. So when you can, leverage on those opportunities. And I think that was a great way that you shared. So does anybody else have anything to add before we move on? No.
I was just going to say that I found it extremely interesting to remember that organizations and entities that are often just thought of as funders have a lot of capacity to contribute in many other ways.
So good. That takes us to something with interaction and feedback, which were the next 2 points. What type of relationships what type of relationships do we have at this stage where we can have those dialogues? I mean, how close are we to each other or to others that we can get better sense of what they need, what the needs are, and how we can leverage on it better, and also the merit of it, like she just mentioned, which brought up really good points. So I like some of the things you shared, and they were quite helpful. I spoke a little bit about this. This is a tool that we use in marketing. Julia, smile. Julia, do you know this tool? Simon? No? Deepa, do you know? And do you want to say, let's see, Deepa?
Oh, crikey. Put me on the spot. The Simon Sinek, it's all about why. If you've not read the book, fully recommend it. I think it's genius. He's gone a bit schmaltzy on various channels subsequent to writing this book, but the essence being like actually figuring out that essence, what is the root cause. And I think it lends itself really nicely to thinking about systems change work, because it's what is the heart of the collaborative effort. We talk a lot about the sum of the parts, and collaborations being about no one individual organization, or not one individual organization solution, but where can the collective intelligence, this is a catalyst approach to collaborations, where can the collective intelligence be the most useful in order to move the collective work or the individual works forward. And so I think the heart of that, the purpose piece, which what he really drills into is really powerful, because it produces clarity. I don't know if I've done it justice. I read it a long time ago, Wando.
Spot on. And I always tell people to watch a YouTube video. You don't have to read the book. It's very simple. Every time you second guess why, and you do it multiple layers just to go through the process. Coming from a brand perspective, you always have to go with products or something visible. And I said, why am I doing this? Same thing with the collaboration effort that she sort of mentioned. Some people said they don't have funding. Some people said they don't know how. So the traditional ways is really newsletters, writing articles, op-eds within your communities. And we don't have to go broadly, because sometimes scale kind of limits your opportunities. But I think one or two, getting on a few newsletters within your environment, and I'll share the slides. I think the slides can be shared so some of you can keep that as a reminder. But nobody said go on national television or CNN and then you're not successful. Within our scope, I know some of you are subscribed to a few newsletters. Our newsletter, how many of you have been profiled, some of your work you're doing? Write me up and say, Wando, I want to share on the newsletter so that others can hear what I'm doing. I think this is a great tool. We have a newsletter, but even other within sectors, their education blogs. I mean, you guys do so much, and then we don't get to hear too much about it. So I want to encourage you. I want to push you a little bit more to put yourself a little bit out there to amplify your voice. Everybody always references social because it's a good way to quickly talk about what you're doing in short and easy ways. So please, I encourage you to consider Facebook. LinkedIn is a great tool. It gets overwhelming, but there's several groups that you can collaborate with on LinkedIn, several groups you can join that are in your circle, that are within that. And even within the Catalyst network, you will find that, similarly, chapters, etc., that you can meet together and see how you can amplify what somebody else is doing. I saw this reenacted in Change Week, where people were posting what others were doing, join this session, join that, and then you guys can leverage off each other's success. And I think this is a good way. These tools are available, and all you have to do is create a LinkedIn page. You can just start there and see how it goes. You can open a Facebook page, and if you're not so savvy, you can work together and get their dummies. I don't want to say open YouTube and Twitter, because then you really need to be engaging, and that wasn't the challenge that you faced, was having time, etc. I just want to reinforce having a few things. How many of you today have social media assets? Maybe we can talk about that. How many people have newsletters? I haven't heard from Addie or Laura. I hope everybody's okay. So everybody here is already equipped. Is there anybody that's still on the fence? Addie says thumbs up. So is it a question of having enough time to put things on these platforms, or not being brave enough? I see Kathleen nodding her head. Can you share a little bit about, I feel like a teacher calling on the students.
Sure, and I totally understand that calling on everybody. So I'm working on an initiative with a team called the Handmade Futures Initiative. And I work with an organization called Trade Plus Impact. We are working with a multi-stakeholder group in the handmade sector to address systemic issues that limit the sector. So an equitable, transparent, prosperous value chain is one goal. And so we've created a vision. We're working with this team. Our target audience is to engage more stakeholders. And we're a volunteer organization. So we do have interns. That was amazing. It's a great way to have get assistance and support. And they do our communication, but it's limited, and that I would say time is a challenge for us. Of course, funding is, but we're not going to let that stop us. So, yeah, I was nodding with understanding that time.
And you think it has more to do, like, you feel that you have a pace, because best practice is actually 2 posts a week, but a lot of people feel like, oh, I need something, I need, to say something every day, because if global brands across the world are doing 2 posts a week, and then it's people that are volunteers, that are active, I think that, you set your own pace as to how often you want to communicate. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, it's a good benchmark. So 2 posts a week. And I think what we've been doing is we're also doing a summit, a digital summit coming up, and we feature the different stakeholders. So it's not always related to this collaboration, but I think it's a great idea. And thank you, to specifically target 2 posts a week as it relates to this collaboration. Yeah.
Deepa?
We hadn't done that.
Okay, sorry.
I wanted to ask a question about like within collaborations, where does, like, when you're thinking about roles and responsibilities as you're setting up collaborations, where does comms play in that planning? Because obviously, given the target audience, like, does that prove to be a challenge? And like, in terms of designing the messaging, and that might be, and the determining the why might be done up front. But when working with others, does like roles and responsibilities, who's doing what, or are, because it seems quite complicated, but bless you, does and channel, like thinking about media, for example, or thought leadership pieces and the positioning of thought leadership, those kinds of things, like Sanju, and like thinking about the role of the private sector in India, for example, and the relationship. Like, how do you think about who does what, and how do you think about what goes where? Sorry, just from a kind of designing collaborations perspective and working with multiple partners, is that a challenge? Deathly silence.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking everyone. I'm just.
I would say yes. Yeah, for sure. Because when we set up the collaboration, we did not identify who was going to do communications. Mm-hmm. We were focused on the collaboration. Yeah, so it's a really, really, really good point for us. Yeah.
Because Sanju, the article in the Economic Times in India, where did that come about? Because there was a great piece with thinking about the role of the private sector and social entrepreneurs, and the work of the India chapter. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I'll just share a little bit about this. This was just prior to the Catalyzing Change Week. And at the India chapter, we realized that, like, we really do need to have some media coverage, and Economic Times in India is a very reputed and respected newspaper. So if you have kind of the first release or the first kind of mention in the Economic Times, then you'll automatically get traction from other news agencies. So what we did was we approached Economic Times, and what was important was, like you said, who is your target audience and what do they really want? So Economic Times was very clear that, do you have something to showcase which totally brings in the corporate piece and the social entrepreneur entrepreneur piece. And if you can tie that together and show us what can come of it. So, I mean, Deepak and I shared about the World Economic Forum was, yeah. So at that point, François from WEF had mentioned about the interest that they have in the India chapter, and that they were looking to find, very credible partners who were doing, really great work on the ground and who could be identified for systems change. And the Catalyst India chapter not only has this, deeply and richly in the collective in terms of members, but also as an aggregator for, through our members, we have like smaller NGO partners whom they work with. So we could aggregate all of them and, present that as a potential partnering opportunity with WEF. The other, so of course, WEF was a great draw for Economic Times, and the work that Catalyst was proposing to do with them. And if I may share one concept that they really liked was, building the networks of scale. So what we found during the interviews that we were doing with corporates and the conversations I mentioned earlier was that corporates do not collaborate often on the solutions that they build towards social impact, whether it was in their CSR space, whether it was in sustainability. And what really came out was that not that they did not wish to, but probably they just did not have the time, or they did not have the necessary platforms or forums to exchange this information. So when we spoke to WEF about bringing in corporate to corporate collaboration, sharing best practices, what worked, what didn't work, just what you said in your previous slide, conserving resources, scaling, solutions, all that Catalyst stands for, but, just transposing it onto their world, then having the social entrepreneur to social entrepreneur collaboration, which we're working on anyway, and then bringing both those pieces together for kind of a network of scale. So that was a piece that I think really kind of appealed to WEF and to Economic Times. So yes, we just had the release literally a day before Catalyzing Change Week. So yeah, it worked out really. Deepa, have I missed anything? Anything relevant?
Nope, I think you covered it.
Yeah, and I think what I liked is the intentionality. You saw what you had and what you could bring, and like what we just mentioned, the what, the why, and you took it, and it was marketable. It was already packaged, is what I like to say, ready to be delivered. And the right platform is what you use. So you already have it, Ms. Gupta. You just have to expand it to different segments and different audiences. So this is a perfect example to showcase, okay, I have a message. I know who I'm going to talk to, who can give me this amplification, and get the corporates interested in me because I was able to articulate what I was looking for. This gave you visibility. This has opened more outlets for you to now think about what sort of segment would I, and this helps when you document, you curate. Laura wrote me, and everybody saw this, but she said she uses LinkedIn, but when she's expanding her WhatsApp and Facebook because she wants to reach farmers. So this is a good way to say, okay, down the scale, I need to talk to the farmers, the beneficiaries and the activities. I want to be able to have a better messaging platform to be able to speak to them. And she knows that what you have on WhatsApp obviously is decentralized, is not as heavy, as rich, and you need to target. But WhatsApp is a great platform if you're talking to people downscale. And I think we always have to consider the messaging, who the target audience is, and what platform you're using. But I like the fact that Kathleen said, we had help, but always remember to consider, at least when you have the content, so that you don't just say, okay, well, we're never going to use it. You have opportunities to recirculate messaging, even from the incept, your story, even your own vision story and how you got started is a thought leadership piece. The collaboration is a thought leadership piece. there are huge opportunities for people to share, like she just did, an opportunity to share what you're doing. And even that alone is a way to communicate what you're doing. A lot of people don't have that challenge. So I wanted to see, Daisy, I know you mentioned you're doing a lot of activities similar. So do you want to share some of the challenges or opportunities that you see and ways we can discuss it so that you can get some ideas easily?
I think we've been the project I'm referring to when I talk about the project is we've got a coalition called the Sustainable Menstruation Coalition that's aiming to provide 100 million women with sustainable menstrual products and education within the next 7 years. So it's starting in India, and then the aim is to bring it elsewhere. And we're lucky because we've got a corporate partner, which is a huge staffing agency in India called Quest Corp, who already work with a huge PR agency in India called Ad Factors. So for now, it's been a lot more on the PR side and working with them. So we're lucky to get a piece in the health part of the Economic Times to try and reach out. So we've sort of got that strategy in the PR side of reaching corporate media via the corporates via the corporate media channels. Our biggest challenge actually has more been on deciding on whether to keep the name, whether to try and get a name in Hindi that would be more relevant to the girls on the ground. Those have been some of our communication challenges and disagreements within the coalition as well, because we're a coalition of NGOs and corporates and different organizations, and so everyone has a sort of different viewpoint on how to target how to reach the girls we're trying to reach. And ultimately, at the moment, as the aim is to get funding, we're keeping the more clear name. If it's the Sustainable Menstruation Coalition, it's kind of sort of self-explanatory, rather than going into different names that might be more appealing, sort of that would sound better.
And what about like the use, because Wanda talked about traditional media earlier, and I know in other parts of the world, particularly on these kinds of issues, traditional media like using radio, for example, has been really useful. Are you looking at kind of different types of media? Because like Wanda said, the automatic is to think, we'll use social media. And although uptake, particularly in India, of smartphones, etc., is on the rise, a lot of campaigns happen in the more traditional TV and radio space. Yeah. How are you looking at that?
So these are some of the ideas from the agency, is sort of having a jingle, having some kind of song. And actually this is one of those ones where the problem becomes circular. Is okay, we want a jingle, then we need a name. We want a name, are we going Hindi? And so it's been these sort of challenges that keep, and then they just got it pushed to the side for the time being. But we've talked about jingles. We've even talked about sort of different PR stunts and having we call it SMC for short, a sort of an SMC van that would have a publicity that would go around and do the trainings, that would even have the jingle. So we've got sort of these ideas that have come and floated, and then they always sort of get stuck at one point. And again, obviously we're working with a communications agency that's waiting to get paid to move forward. So in the meantime, we've decided to be we're on LinkedIn and Twitter, because at the moment we're focusing on the corporate side. They're the two medias that we've privileged for now. And again, the same blockage for going onto Instagram is, do we keep the Sustainable Menstruation Coalition, which is a huge mouthful, or do we find do we wait until we have a public facing name that's more attractive to the girls on the ground? And even the second level is, how do you keep this Indian coalition and collaboration? Do you separate it from the wider collaboration? So sorry, I've gone quite a few challenges.
No, I think it raises an interesting opportunity, actually, because on ground and live and experiential is, you don't have those challenges, because you can articulate and communicate exactly what you want, which is through a school or through an activity. Socially, you just pick one location at a time and say, this is what we're doing. Here's a flyer. You don't need a LinkedIn. You don't need to be sophisticated to be able to articulate that. And a lot of social causes across Africa, this is how they worked really well with malaria, with COVID, because some of these people are never going to get on Facebook or digital or WhatsApp, and you just kind of go door to door have a door-to-door flyer activation, and you just literally just say what you're doing. And this is where the collaborations, you look for an organization that you could partner with, and they can just support you better because they have the people, they have the girls, they have a school, and then you just kind of activate, test it, learn, collate some data, have some pictures for your nice corporates, and then you start. Because once you think name and logo, and you kind of like, wait, I'm not professional enough, it's not nice enough, it's not snackable. But in the doing, I am sure that there's several in the Indian chapter that have avenues for girls that you could just say, I would like to talk to them. I think this is an opportunity to just be there on ground and just kind of see how they receive the message, and if we need it. So yeah.
Can I
Worth-
just come in for a sorry?
Go ahead.
Yes, so just to the point of the name, Daisy, there was this large Indian corporate, Larsen and Toubro, L&T, and they had a financial services, they have a financial services wing, and they wanted to, one of the key programs was financial literacy for rural women in India. And honestly, like initially when they spoke about financial literacy, all of that, nothing really worked. And then a simple change, Daisy, just to underline what you said about the name, they use the name Digital Sakhi. Sakhi in Hindi means friend. So, you know, that just kind of changed the, you know, it just was something they could connect with immediately. And, you know, it became one of their huge flagship success initiatives. So just wanted to share that with you. And just building on the point that was earlier mentioned about, since we are from the India chapter, and you know, almost everyone in the India chapter is working with a focus group that you would love to reach out to. So happy to connect separately and see how that can work. And just on the third piece about the corporates coming in separately and the your focus audience separate, there was another big learning for us during COVID, was that when we unify by cause and we don't differentiate by sector, that is the time we see the most amount of success. So, for example, if you've taken the menstrual cycle and that's the cause, then everyone unifies by that cause rather than, coming in with the corporate sector angle. So just to illustrate why the vaccination story was so successful in India was, the government did their bit to push, gave all the support for the vaccinations and the huge publicity drive, everything. The corporates really stepped up production, logistics, all of that, railways came in. But to administer the vaccination and get the community's buy-in, and that overcome the vaccine hesitancy, that was the role that was essayed by the social entrepreneur who had been working with the community for years and years and who had the trust of the community. So it was completely unifying by cause is what I meant. Everyone put their best foot forward. So I'm quite sure that this might work in this case also. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Great.
so much.
You got some free consultancy.
So I hope I'm not overstepping.
No,
just sharing
not at
from what
all.
we've
It's all
learned.
insights. I love it. AD wanted some advice as well. Is she still on? Do you want to elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, I am still here. So sorry I joined late. I was running late. But it's very interesting because I'm running a nonprofit company in South Africa. And what we're struggling with is communicating something that's never been done in our country before. Therapeutic clowning is very common globally in foreign countries, but in Africa, it's just something that people don't understand and can't conceive. So, finding partners and collaborating with people who would support this initiative, because it really is about collaboration, is what I'm struggling with, to get that message out. And I'm wondering if anybody has any ideas or suggestions on how I can go about, speaking to the right people in a language they will understand on a subject matter that they're not familiar with. That makes sense.
Yes, for sure. And I think what we've been sharing should give you some ideas in terms of breaking it down to who the target audience is, what kind of content would make people understand better, simple, clear, if you feel it's complicated, or what are the barriers, so we can look at it, we can peel in the Simon circle. What are the barriers? How can we peel the layers off to sort of find out what is causing the confusion or what is causing the clarity? And I think that would help you a lot. So you have it in the back of your head. It's very clear, but clearly maybe the tools, the messaging, the audience that you're articulating it, we need to make it simpler, make it emotional. I always tell people emotional with a little bit of functional. To see how we can make it people more aware. It could be that your first layer or first leg of your activity is awareness and getting people to know what this is about, because sometimes people don't. And I'm sure Daisy's that's some of her challenges. So it's just to keep that in mind as you're going.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. I think we're almost done. So I'm happy that we had a lot of the discussions. Did you want to add something, Kathleen? I see your hand moving. Your hand is moving.
I've got to jump off.
Okay,
and I
great.
So
nice
appreciated. I wrote it in the chat. I so appreciated meeting and hearing about everyone, and
great.
love to get the presentation. Thank you.
Great. All the best. So I think we've discussed tools, what you'll need. So I think I wanted to end with how we at Catalyst can be more supportive. How can we support your vision? Like Adi had mentioned, how can we be more instrumental? Deepa and her team are doing a great job in introducing the different people, making the connections, but how can we facilitate some of your initiatives to see how we can support you better? And that's really.
Oh, Wanda, you've muted.
I had to run because my laptop charger went dun dun. So that's why I shut it off initially.
Okay.
So I'm here. I charged it. It's ready. So I wanted to hear from you guys how Deepa, Julia, Mishri can sort of be that support system as you journey through these collaborations very early. We have a team that is willing to introduce, inspire, engage, and challenge you to these collaborations.
But from a communications angle here.
I know.
Let's be clear. Wanda was directing that. But as we're thinking about, because obviously as we're supporting you in bringing about collaborations and meeting other members, we've talked about the various kind of tools and processes and resources that you might need. But to my question earlier, in terms of the roles and responsibilities and that kind of getting bogged down with delivery and action, whether it's a report, for example, often we've got groups, collaborations that are working on producing reports, but then it gets to the production and it's, oh, what are we doing with it? What's the dissemination strategy? Where do you want this report to be seen? We want to do a series of workshops, but how can we support, and what are the resources that you need from a communications perspective that at the beginning and the kind of ideation and design stages can also help you think about audience mapping, or this is an advocacy tool for a report, for example. What are some of the things that are coming up? I'm using report as an example because we've got one coming out soon. So and then there's a group who's producing a report soon, so we're thinking about it. And also, and that's also kind of design, and even budgeting for design and communication costs. How do you build that into your budgets from the outset? Because often so much focus is put on the delivery costs that actually then comms becomes oh, we didn't think about that. And you need to think about it from the outset. So these are the things that kind of the different stages of collaboration. You know, is it resources? Is it more sessions like this? Is it, how do we flag and support you to think about these things? I think is the question. Come on, Daisy, I'm expecting a whole list from you. You've been around a long time.
No, I was going to just say even it just from, I think you already do in the newsletter as well, just sharing success stories. If there's a member that's had a really successful campaign or a really successful strategy, and just, but that would need, the member would have to obviously flag that up as well. So it's not just your responsibility, but everyone else's.
And do you think, like, in terms of that, because you talked like in our, like, because we can talk about our newsletter, because we have two different newsletters, one that is for internal, that goes to members, and one that is external as well. And the collaboration stories tend to go into both. But what about those who are wanting to step out of the ecosystem of social entrepreneurs? And because a lot of the time we end up talking to each other. How do you think about positioning outside of that world? Or is that the only world that matters? I'm just here to ask the hard questions with Wando.
They've mentioned their struggles. You're giving them more things to think about.
No, but that's a good one also, actually, identifying communication strategies from, you know, successful corporates we might usually hate, but that might have lessons to share in those areas.
Wando's all about sharing corporate stories from those those we hate. Go on, Wando.
Sorry, no. But as but
Netflix
as
stories
that have the budget. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And that's why I liked Miss Gupta's insights, is because it's kind of a necessary evil in a way. And I'm not saying we shield them out, but they help with the voice. I mean, those platforms, and it's not that we kick them out completely, but we also have to go where they are looking, because they don't get our newsletters. And how do they hear about your story if we're only in the closed circle? And that's why they were intentional to say, we go to the Economic Times. This is where business people read. And then when they have some sprinkle or leftover CSR or sustainability figures, I mean, this is where we would like to look at. So it's important to see who, remember I started with the beginning, if it's a funder story or a donor, or, you know, you're putting it out there for, then the newsletter is great because you're within your community. And when we did the awards this year, it was very clear, because we have a corporates category, just to see, you know, how they think and what they're looking for, especially because these were big ones. But when we do more and get more regional and more specific, and Deepa knows because she did these interviews, you can tell what they look out for. And news, unfortunately, is something that they like. So even as a marketing person, having news and media is credibility, is, you know, ways that they can, it's a hard thing because you have to follow these steps, but it's, as you go bigger, as you grow in scale, it's something to consider as well. Any more questions, Eva or Heidi or Laura or Anmish? You've been quiet.
Well, I was just going to share an image that came to mind as some of these questions were being presented, but it's, you know, where we are, wherever it is that we are standing physically in actual space in terms of where the program is or the initiative that we have, and then looking forward to the vision of where we would like to end up and be. There are many different paths and many different channels to go from here to there, and so the image that I end up with is the, you know, the African watering hole. Where are the elephants? There, where the water is. So what is it that's going to feed the audience that we're looking for to communicate to? what's the water and where is it? And there's no actual answer. There's an answer that's very specific to every category. So if it's elephants, they'll be where there's a big watering hole. Where there's anteaters, there'll be lots of ants. So we actually need to think about what it is that we are trying to identify, that we're trying to communicate to. But that doesn't mean that's the only path. None of this, of course, gives you the specific answers to all these questions, but I just thought I'd share the image.
And thank you for that. Thank you for that, Eva. That was really nice. Nice picture and visuals. Everybody smiled. They could see it, especially the ants. Is that it? Are we good? Have we maximized that
May
time?
I just share one observation about
Yes,
the corporate piece, if there's a minute? So I think somewhere, we also tend to paint all corporates with the same brush, and maybe that's a conversation for another session. But it's not like there are corporates who are very socially responsible, who are genuinely invested in what they are doing in building sustainability into their organizational fabric. And like what you shared was about not always presenting the negative stories. So maybe showcasing some of the great partnerships where they've actually gone into co-creating solutions and, wanted and like being really invested. The other thing that I'd like to share is COVID has changed things a lot. One was, so another conversation for another day, but the amount of collaboration that happened between the corporates and social entrepreneurs, especially in India, I speak only from my limited knowledge of India. Like corporates were really, running through, cutting all red tape, bringing in their chartered accountants to, they have a lot of compliance issues in India. There's a lot of reporting that they have to do for every fund that they release, but they cut through all of that. They understood the need for speed, and they totally relied on social entrepreneurs to make sure that the aid reached where it was needed the most and when it was needed the most. So I think the role of the social entrepreneur has kind of been spotlighted, unfortunately, through a very sad, pandemic. But yes, the silver lining in that whole story. So yeah, I just wanted to share, that maybe we could have conversations around those issues as well.
Great. That's another thing, Deepa, is post-pandemic collaborations and changes along the way we can think about for moving forward. People that have had to change lanes post-pandemic, and that's something to think about too. Staying true or moving to something a little bit more relevant for them. Thank you for that. So I want to end with saying thank you so much for your time, for your attention. I think everybody was quite engaged. Everybody gave their own perspective and own regional focus. And as you can see, everybody's challenges and tensions are at different paces, different places. I once went to a yoga studio in Chicago, and the lady said, some of you are in a canoe and some of you are in a cruise ship. And I said, I don't want to be in a canoe, but I was in a canoe that day. So please enjoy your own vision and your mission, and ensure that you are inspiring all of us with the work that you're doing. And we're quite excited for everything you're doing. And congratulations for coming this far. I know you don't get that quite often because it's a long journey, but just even being here is quite impressive for me from my end. So thank you so much. And have a great day.
Thank you very much.
It was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.